Hi everybody, this is Michael Siegel. Just wanted to make a quick video on edges, something that I see perplexing a lot of students in class, particularly in portrait class. Edges, obviously the big question is hard or soft. So I took this Sargent painting off the internet arbitrarily just to show the theory of edges and really simplify it for you guys so that you can understand which edges on the face ought to be hard and which ones are soft and why. Luckily, the theory of edges is very simple, and just as luckily, everyone has the same major forms on their head, which means everyone pretty much has the same hard and soft edge pattern. Now, one thing that I notice with students is they maybe pay a little bit too much attention to the planes of the head. Now, it's good to know the planes of the head. But you might have something like this in your studio or, something similar. And I never really recommend these things to students, and I never use them myself. And the reason being, it's nice that we get to see which direction all the different planes of the head might be facing and how they might be influenced by different light sources. But the problem is that they don't tell you anything about edges. A sculpture like this, all of the edges meet each other on a similar edge, so all the edges have the same quality. Anything that looks harder or softer to you is just because of the contrast of how much light is on them. For example, this edge might look crisp to you, but it's no more crisp than the next edge. There's just more contrast. So again, these things are nice for understanding which direction things face, but they're not very good for telling you what edges should be like. To understand edges, hard and soft edges, you have to understand something bigger than planes, which is forms. Now, forms are complete ideas that start and end, and in between, they have various planes. They're big ideas made of planes. The way I look at it is planes are like words, and forms are like sentences. They start with a capital letter, so everyone knows they're starting right there. They continue to explain something through various words or planes, and then they end in a period. So everyone knows that that form is now over, and the next form starts right where that period leaves off, starts with a capital letter again. And that's much the way that forms are on not just the head, but on anything. So taking a look at Sargent here, we'll go through that and understand what are the major forms of the head here, and how should we figure out what the edges are. So let's take a look quickly at the most simple form, a ball. Okay, that's what we're going to look at now. Here's a ball. Okay, now the first theory of edges is incredibly simple. It's just that the boundary of the form, meaning the perimeter all the way around it, theoretically is hard, which means you have to kind of let go of these notions of lost and found edges for the time being, and just go with me on this theory. The reason that the perimeter of the form is hard is because that's actually what defines the form itself, is its boundaries. If we lose the boundary into the next form or into the background, well then this form has no integrity of its own. So the entire boundary of the form is crisp. The next thing that we have to think about is anything that happens inside the form. So as artists, we might, have a corner where it either changes from light to shadow or from one plane to another, one color to another. And it's inside the form that everything happens softly. So here I just, gave an idea of where this corner would be that goes from light to shadow, and to denote it as a soft change. Now here, coloring it in, I kept all the edges crisp. At this point, everything's crisp, so it just looks like a flat disc. It doesn't have any dimension. But if we just soften out that major plane change from light to shadow and create softness between the different colors within these planes, you can see I added a bunch of different lights and a bunch of different colors here. I could have done this on camera, but I didn't want it to be too tedious to watch. It's just to show you that at this point, I still have completely crisp edges all the way around the object, and yet, it looks round to a certain extent, as much as it can without any background helping it out. And it has nothing to do with the perimeter edge. It's all how I'm handling the inside. One last thing I did here was just to show that if you do lose your outside edge, and I went obviously very extreme here to try to prove a point, now we have no form at all. We just have this ghost-like, wavering of the light between light and shadow, but it's not confined to any particular form, so it loses structure, and instead all we have is lit up and darkened atmosphere, but no form itself. So edges really just means that you have to have hard edges on the boundaries of your forms, and then, of course, varying degrees of softness within. Okay, so that's just kind of a really quick rundown for that. But going into Sargent and really analyzing Sargent now, let's take a look at the forehead, for example. Now, this might just look like a forehead, and when you stare at the model, you might not be able to see which edge is harder than another. They might all look the same, especially if you don't have an educated eye and you don't know the structures of the head and the theory of edges. So looking at the model, you might just guess. And if you guess, the problem is that you won't communicate clearly to the viewer the universal form of the head, which I'm here to tell you is something like a block. So let me ghost down Sargent and kind of analyze this forehead form for you. The way this forehead form looks, as far as the artist is concerned, is something like this. It's kind of like a cube tilted in space. Something like this. And I'll blow this up in a minute. Okay, you see this cube? Nothing fancy. Let me lighten up my background for a minute so you can see it more clearly. Okay, there it is. It's a cube. And if you look at this cube without looking at the model or without looking at Sargent, and just going by the theory I explained, you'd know that this is a hard edge here. This is a hard edge along the top, and a hard edge along the back, and even this bottom edge, okay, which on the actual portrait happens to be hidden quite a bit. But again, just going with the theory, this is now a soft edge, and this is a soft edge. And that's what gives this form its integrity. If we go ahead and just fill this in with shadow plane for fun, you can see that this still holds up as a form. The viewer's understanding this plane is in light, that plane is in shadow, this plane is in light, that plane is in shadow. Okay, that's how we have to interpret the forehead when we're actually staring at a model. So if we actually go to Sargent, let's find his version of that. Here's the back side of the cube, which is this line right here. Okay, that's this guy coming all the way up, going around the top of the head, coming down and cutting in internally right here. Hope you can see that the forehead is cutting in internally here. If we actually look for this bottom hard edge that I drew here, it's hard because it cuts right through the eyes. So technically, it has to skip over that eye, climb up the nose, go back down, skip over this eye, and then we finally get there. And of course, the eyes are their own separate form, so they don't take any part in this edge. And, to really get the topography right with the nose, excuse me, this edge actually ends up coming all the way up to here. Okay, so that edge isn't much of a help for us, but how about the internal edges? Well, here's one corner, and here's the other one. Students usually have a hard time believing that this eyebrow, the brow edge, is soft. They kind of tend to think, well, what do you mean? That's close to me, and the top of the head is far from me. So they think this out here going away like this should all be soft. And this is so close to me at the brow, this should be hard. They make the same mistake on the nose, thinking, this edge should be really hard, and then it goes back into this softness down here. edge has nothing to do with how close or far away an edge is from the viewer. It only has to do with what I said before, the perimeter. I mean, there are ways to show atmosphere and what is close and what is far, but it's not with literal crispness and sharpness in general. Okay, so here's Sargent's forehead with the edge work applied to it, and if I want, I can just knock this in shadow real quick, just to make it that much more clear. If I take Sargent completely out of the equation. Okay, so there we are. This is our form simplified, okay, with its boundaries. Now, why is it important that I'm bringing up these boundaries? Because we have some really important edges to look at on Sargent, particularly right here and here, because these are the lateral boundaries of that forehead, and it's what makes the forehead look narrower than, let's say, the cheek form, which is wider. So let's turn on Sargent again and turn me off. Okay, so here's Sargent. Now when you look, I mean, especially from a distance, but up close you can see it too, you can see how clearly Sargent is taking care to divide the forehead from the cheek. He's really keeping a crisp edge right there so that the viewer doesn't get confused. See? You see that? What I see students doing is blurring these edges together because they don't realize they're two completely different structures. That's too big a brush, hold on. But I want to imitate doing things wrong. And it looks something like this. Okay, now there's no division between the forehead and the cheek. Now, of course, Sargent has done so much good work here that this doesn't exactly spoil the whole painting, but it gives him a little bit of the feeling of a fat head compared to what Sargent did. Okay, I'm going back and forth for you guys so you can see Sargent versus student. Sargent, student. Now, I mean, that's just one tiny little spot, but let's go to the other temple and make the same mistake. Let's say the student here is more focused on the corner and really sharpens up this corner and then blurs out behind it where the cheek meets the forehead. Okay, so again, Sargent has so many good things going on in this painting that it's hard to say this ruins the painting absolutely, but we can't feel a forehead at all here anymore. We can't tell where the thing begins and ends. As far as we're concerned, it begins at the back of the head now. Let me try to delineate this. As far as we can tell now, the forehead starts back here and ends here. Like it's all one giant form like that, which of course is not true. So let me turn off our bad work and show Sargent's good work. Now we can really feel how the forehead is narrower than the cheek form. You see that? Okay, this is, I mean, just the tip of the iceberg in terms of edge work. I mean, another one to talk about for fun would be the cheek form. So let me do that briefly. Get my pencil back. Okay, so the cheek form, if we wanted to look for its boundaries, we would start right up at that same boundary against the forehead. And it's coming down here. It actually comes inside the form there because that's the jaw behind it. It wraps around the form of the eye here, along the side of the nose, along the side of the muzzle, and in, you know, here different models start being different ethnicities, different actual physiognomy, a little bit how this might connect to the chin. But let's just go this far down with that form and consider this to be one-dimensional form, okay? In this case, you know, what we have is the smile line over here. Students, they'll put in a nice dark plane here, but they won't know which side of it is hard or soft. They might do this one hard and this one soft, or they might do it the other way and not know why. But clearly when you understand form, you know this is the boundary. This is where the muzzle ends, okay, the muzzle's coming around this way, right? It's coming here, goes into the dip, out, comes around, and it stops there. That's the edge of the muzzle. So this is a crisp edge. And this just happens to be a fold inside the form. So this corner, this one is soft, okay, to make it look like it's just rolling over. Okay, it's just going from this plane to this plane. It's just rolling. So we understand that's, that's the actual soft edge. And any of the other internal forms that might not go from light to shadow, just from color to color, again, soft work, unless you're dividing this into two separate forms. Okay, so I hope that helps out. Let's take that off and put Sargent back on. I can also kind of go back in and do some bad work on here again. Let's turn back on the bad work. Okay, so the student who doesn't understand here, they'll do things backwards. They'll say, okay, I'm not sure which side of the smile line is hard or soft. I'm going to go ahead and just soften the smile line so that it looks more sophisticated. Softness just is, so much more sophisticated. And I'll, so if you do that, again, we're already losing where the muzzle ends and where the cheek begins because we got so enamored with softening an edge. Again, let's turn that bad work off and bring back Sargent's good work. The crisp edge of the smile line here. You see how it defines where the two forms meet. Now we feel the muzzle getting hugged by the cheek form, by the fleshy cheek. And if last form I'll analyze, we could do this all day, but last form I'll really get into analyzing is just the muzzle itself. I'll do that on a separate layer. Okay, so the muzzle. The muzzle starts on that same edge, the smile line edge. It goes under the nose and behind the nose because it actually starts up higher. On the other side, here's the symmetrical hard edge, theoretical hard edge. And I'll just deal with the top half of the muzzle here. The hard edge at the base of this is actually where the lips meet. Okay, that's the end of this particular form. And the big turn in the form is the upper lip itself here. Okay, that's again another surprisingly soft edge for students. They tend to really draw out a very crisp M here. But of course that's not the actual form. If you look at the profile of the head, for example, if you have a nose coming down this way and the lip coming this way, it's a generally soft turn down into the mouth here. That's this corner right here that we're talking about. This is not the end of a form. The form ends down here. This is what we're talking about. This is a rounded form, and then there's another form for the next lip. So don't overdo this corner, okay? Don't sharpen that corner. This is actually a soft corner. Okay, so going back to this form, that's our soft edge. This is all shadow underneath. And again, it's the hard edge itself that gives the thing its identity. Really, if I wanted to simplify that form one more time for you, it's like this. Here's the form. That's the actual form itself. Now we can easily turn this kind of idea into a mouth, especially when coupled with the subsequent form that goes underneath, which is, the form, it's almost a symmetrical form upside down that makes up the lower lip, okay? This actually becomes a mouth pretty quickly, especially if we have a nose up here. Okay, you can kind of see how this has already become a mouth. And we're only considering the muzzle as a single form that has crisp edges on its boundaries and soft edges within. And again, when you look at Sargent, he makes that clear enough for us. He has softened. Let's do the student mistake again. Let me get my paintbrush out and let me overly crispen. Oh, let me get onto my bad layer. Okay. Sorry. Okay, here's our bad layer. I'm going to overly crisp the top of the mouth here. Okay. And we've already gotten rid of the beginning of the muzzle. Let's also get rid of any sharpness at the end of the muzzle down here. Keep this all really soft. Okay, so I've messed up a number of edges here now. Let's just turn it on and off. Okay. Well, I think it's enough to show you what I'm talking about. So, yes, it's important to understand the planes, which way things are facing, but it's much more important to understand forms, where they begin, where they end, and let that guide your edge work so that you can keep your forms separate from one another. I'll just spend a few more seconds destroying Sargent's great work here by softening edges, just because I'm not sure whether they should be hard or soft. And, you know, I'll harden this edge of the eye socket because it's close to me. Just trying to make a lot of the mistakes that I see in class come to life here. Same with the nose. I will blur the back of the nose because it's far away. I'm going to blur that. Pardon me. And I will overly sharpen the ball of the nose because it's nice and close. Okay. I'll get rid of the hard edge at the base of the eye bag form and at the base of the eyeball itself. Just kind of trying to soften all the wrong edges, harden all the wrong edges. Ooh, this is a good hard edge. At the base of the chin, I'll just soften that out so that that has no particular form. And maybe just for good measure, I will soften out some of the leading edges over here. Soften some of these out to get more atmosphere. Okay, so this is if we take a lot of Sargent's good edge work and obliterate it. Okay? Because we're unsure what should be crisp or soft. You know, we're basically keeping his same value design for the most part. I'm hardly changing any values. Maybe here and there I changed a couple. Not really deliberately. I'm just trying to change the edge quality. And certainly we lose the feeling of the separate forms of the head and the way that the forms seem to be interlocking with one another. And we're left with something similarly graphically, like if I made it really tiny, you might still think this is pretty good. I haven't, you know, here I'm turning it on and off and you can hardly tell a difference. Because the value scheme, I mean, Sargent did that, right? We didn't take that out. So it's still reading like a strong painting, but it really shows kind of no understanding of the head or what we're doing. Okay, I hope that helps. It's just something I like to think about and teach. Try to find those simple forms of the head. Notice where they end, where they begin, and let that guide your hard edge work throughout the painting. Not how close or far away the edge is, but really it's to help define the boundaries of a form and juxtapose it to the next form, whether it's overlapping that form in front or being overlapped, you know, behind. All right, hope that helps, and I look forward to the next video. Thanks, you guys. Bye.